Dealings with the Dead, number 30. Funerals in the earlier days of Rome must have been very showy affairs. They were torch-lit processions by night. You will gather some information on this subject by consulting a note of Servius on Virgil's Aeneid 11:143. Cicero de Legibus 2:26 says that Demetrius ordered nocturnal funerals to check the taste for extravagance. In these matters, ista igitur sumptum minaet non solum poena sed etiam tempor anta lucem enim justit efferre. A more ancient law of similar import will be found and recited in the oration of Demosthenes against Macartatus 882. Doves London edited Orat Attica. I don't know what Orat and Attic stands for. Funis are funiculi, or small ropes or cords covered with wax or tallow. Such were the torches used on such occasions. Hence the word funis or funeral. A confirmation of this may be found in the note of Servius, Aeneid 1:727. In a latter age, funerals were celebrated in the forenoon. There were some things done at ancient funerals which would be accounted very extraordinary at the present day. What should we say to a stuffed effigy of the defunct, composed entirely of cinnamon, and paraded in the procession? Plutarch says such was the quantity of spices brought in by the women at Sylla's funeral, that, exclusive of those carried in 210 great baskets, a figure of Sylla at full length, and of a lictor besides, was made entirely of cinnamon and the choicest frankincense. At the head of Roman funerals came the typicanus, pipers, and trumpeters, immediately following the designator, or undertaker, and the lictors, dressed in black. Next came the praeficia, qua debant cateris modum plangenda. These were women hired to mourn and sing the funeral song, who were popularly termed howlers. To this practice Horace alludes in his Art of Poetry, atque conducte plorant in funer decunt et faciant prop plura dolentibus ex animo, which Francis well translates as hirelings paid for the funeral tear, outweep the sorrows of a friend sincere. I once witnessed an exhibition of this kind in one of the West India Islands. A planter's funeral occurred at Christianstadt, the west end of Santa Cruz. After the corpse had been lowered into the grave, a wild ululation arose from the mouths of some 100 slaves who had followed from the plantation. Oh, what good massa he was! Good, dear old massa gone. No poor slave ever have such kind massa. No more any such good kind massa come again. I noticed one hard favored fellow who made a terrible noise, and upon whose features, as he turned the whites of his big eyes up toward heaven, there was a sinister and, now and then, rather a comical expression, and who, when called to assist in filling up, appeared to throw on the earth, as if he did it from the heart. After the work was done, I called him aside. "You have lost an excellent master," said I. The fellow looked warily around, and perceiving that he was not overheard, replied in an undertone, "No, massa. He bad mule, big old villain. Me glad the devil got him." Having thus relieved himself of his feelings, he hastened to join the gang, and I soon saw him as they filed off on their way back to the plantation, throwing his brawny arms aloft and joining in the cry, "Oh, what kind good massa he was!" Upon inquiry I learned that this planter was a very bad mule indeed, a merciless old taskmaster. Not more than 10 flute players were allowed at a funeral. By the 12 tablets, the flutes and trumpets were large and of lugubrious tones. Thus Ovid, fast, I don't know what that's abbreviated for, 660, Katabat, Mustis, Tibia, Furnibus, and M, I don't know what AM stands for, 266, Prolonga, Resonet, Carmina, Vestra tuba. Nothing appears more incomprehensible in connection with this subject than the employment of players and buffoons by the ancients at their funerals. This practice is referred to by Suetonius in his Life of Tiberius, c. 57. We are told by Dionysius, 772, that these Lydia, Histriones, and Scurra danced and sang. One of this class of performers was a professed mimic, and was styled Archimedes. Strange as such a proceeding may appear to us, it was his business to imitate the voice, manner, and gestures of the defunct. He supported the dead man's character and repeated his words and sayings. In the Life of Vespasian, section 19, Suetonius thus describes the proceeding: "In funerare favor Archimedes personam ejus ferens imitensque ut s mos facta act dicta viva," and so on. This favor must have been a comical fellow, and is as free with the dead as Killigrew Charles II's gesture was with the living, as the reader will perceive if he will refer to the passage in Suetonius, "For the fellow openly cracks his jokes on the absurd expense of the funeral." This, we should suppose, was no subject for joking, if we may believe the statement of Pliny, 33:47, that one of C. Caecilius Claudius, a private citizen, left rather more than 9,000 pounds sterling by his will for his funeral expenses. After the Archimedes came the freemen of the deceased, Pliati, that is, wearing their capes of liberty, men, not unfrequently, as a last act, to swell their funeral train, freed their slaves. Before the corpse were carried the images of the defunct and of his ancestors, but not of such as had been found guilty of any heinous crime. Thus Tacitus, 232, relates that the image of Libo was not permitted to accompany the obsequies of any of his posterity. The origin of the common practice of marching at military funerals with arms reversed is of high antiquity. Thus Virgil, 1193, at the funeral of Pallas, Vercis, Arcadis, Armis, and upon another occasion, Versi, Fascus, occur in Tacitus 3:2, referring to the lictors. In our cities and large towns, the corpse is commonly borne to the grave in a hearse are on the shoulders of paid bearers. Originally, it was otherwise. The office of supporting the body to the grave was supposed to belong of right and duty to the relatives and friends, are, in the case of eminent persons, the public functionaries. In some societies, that's still how it works. Thus, in Tacitus 3:2, we find the expression tribunorum centurionum humeris cineris portabantur, and upon the death of Augustus Tacitus, probably 1:8, it was carried by acclamation, as we moderns say, corpus ad rogum humeris senatorum ferendum. The conduct of both sexes at funerals was, in some respects, was rather ridiculous in those days. Virgil says of King Latinus, when he lost his wife, "Et scissa vesta Latinus Canitium immundo profusum pulvere turpens," which means in plain English that the old monarch went about with his coat torn, defiling his white hair with filthy dust. Cicero, in his Tusculan Questions 326, is entirely of this opinion. Detestabilia genera legende padoris muliebres lacerationes genorum pectoris feminam capitis percussiones. Detestable kinds of mourning, covering the body with filth, women tearing their cheeks, bosoms, and limbs, and knocking their heads. Tibullus, in the concluding lines of his charming elegy to Delia, the first of his first book, though he evidently derives much happiness from the conviction that she will mourn for him and weep over his funeral pile, implores her to spare her lovely cheeks and flowing hair. No classical reader will censure me for transcribing this very fine passage. Te spectum suprema mehe quum veneret hora te teneum moriens deficinte mana flebis at arsuro positum me delia lecto. Tristibus et larimis oscula mixta dabis. Flebis non toa sunt duro pracordia ferro vincta nec in tenero stat tibi corde silex illo non juvenis pateret de funere quisquam lumina non virgo sicca refere domum tu manus ue lada mens sed parca salutis crnibus et teneris delia parca genus. The suti or sacrifice of the widows of Hindostan on the funeral pile of their husbands was not more a matter of course than the laceration of the hair and cheeks among Roman women. It was undoubtedly accounted disreputable for a widow to appear in public after the recent funeral of her husband with locks unpolled and cheeks unscratched. To such extremity had this absurd practice proceeded that the 5th law of the 10th of the 12 tablets, to which reference has been made in a formal number, was enacted to prevent it. Mulieres genas ne redunto. No discretion matron perpetuates any such absurdity in modern times. The hair and cheeks of the departed have occasionally given evidence of considerable laceration from some cause unknown, but neither the law of the tables nor the pathos of a Kippalas is commonly required to prevent a Christian widow from laying violent hands upon her cheeks or her hair. And Islam more explicitly forbids the mourning clothes and bewailing and hurting yourself over the dead or that sort of stuff.